All right, so it has officially been 1 year since I took delivery of my Rivian. In today's video, we'll tell you all the good, the bad, the ugly, everything I've loved and hated about my Rivian R1T. Let's get right into it. It is hard to believe that it has been just over a year since I took delivery of my 2023 Rivian R1T quad motor with the large battery pack, adventure package, and the all-terrain package. It's kind of a mouthful. We'll kind of dive into some of those things later on in the video, but I took delivery of it in late July of 2024, and here we are in the beginning of August, and I'm giving you my honest, candid feedback. We're talking everything I love about it and everything I hate, and I will be completely upfront, truthful, and honest with you. I have no issues with trash talking Rivian for all the things that they should do better, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that I love so much about this car. I don't think there's another vehicle I've owned that I've been so emotional, kind of bipolar with. There's this, duality of loving it and hating it at the same time, and kind of just depends on the day you ask me. So, a lot to unpack in this video. It's going to be a little bit of a longer video because I want to pack in everything about my entire experience for the year. First off, let's start with the things that I love about this vehicle, and there's a lot. I would say the first thing I really love about this vehicle is the practicality, which is silly to say coming from a car enthusiast, but honestly, that is got to be one of the best things about this vehicle. It really is a Swiss Army knife, and that will be kind of a main theme for this video. And it's been the main theme for the Rivian R1T ever since I reviewed it several years ago. But one of the decisions I had in purchasing this vehicle was we had a baby, and I wanted something a little bit more practical and safer. I will quickly touch on the safety. This is, 5-star crash test rated, and in fact, I think this is the safest pickup truck you can buy on the market today. So it was definitely a consideration for me in selling my Bronco and getting something a little bit more safe. But practicality was the other big feature, and that is the fact that there's just so many things you can fit in here. And I was noticing very early on was that, for being so small, babies take up a lot of space in the additional things you have to bring, the strollers, the high chairs, etc. And so I have found that this thing has not disappointed. So first off, I do use this front trunk, the frunk, very often. It's sleeping right now, so hopefully it'll open up. Yeah, there you go. See, another one of the issues of this vehicle. Sometimes it's a little bit slow to react, but I love the fact that it's power operated. I don't know if I would use it as often if it wasn't, kind of like in the Tesla products, but I love that, and I use this frunk all the time, definitely for groceries. This is kind of like my trunk in a sedan for grocery runs and whatnot. But then I also use this little shelf area. I fold it up when I pack in stuff for like a road trip. So duffel bags go in here, different little toys, stuff like that. So I definitely use this feature a ton. And that is one of the large storage areas in the vehicle. Talking about the interior, there's not too much that I use in the front row in terms of storage. You do have this little shelf area that separates the driver and the passenger side. I usually just throw like a cake or something if I'm transporting it. So I don't really use that for permanent storage. I don't love stuff kind of just sitting in the car, but I'm gonna be kind of embarrassing myself here because you'll see in the second row there are tons of stuff just laying around. But the amount of storage that I use in the second row, or the most common amount of storage that I use in the second row, is best to show you on the driver's side. That is the under-seat storage. So there is some under-seat storage over here. Don't mind the stuffed animals, but I use this a ton. As you can see, I have some kind of rags back here. I've also got this cart cover, got some blankets. So I do use that a ton for different things. I also have some straps located down there, but otherwise, interior storage, nothing too much to report. And then I will mention again, you do have this little compartment over here on the driver and passenger side where I put some sunglasses and some spare keys and stuff like that. Moving on, this is the part that I use the most in terms of storage, and that is the massive gear tunnel. So let me open it on the passenger side as well. But this is a feature that I use literally every day. As you can see, it's packed to the brim. So not only do I have this attachment for a stroller, but then I also have pack and play in there, a bunch of camp chairs and umbrellas and stuff like that. But not only do I use it for a bunch of storage to kind of hide out of plain sight, but I also use this occasionally to put the car seat on, or if I sit down, tie my shoes. I use this a lot of times like a chair. I don't necessarily use it to get onto the roof or anything like that, but I use it very often. Now, the other advantage that I find with this storage area is when I'm transporting, you know, kind of refrigerated items, generally I find this area does not get as warm as the front trunk or the truck bed. And so typically I will throw stuff in like an insulated bag with an ice pack, throw it in there, and I find that it keeps the area generally cool enough to transport refrigerated items. Next, moving to the next most used surface, and that is the truck bed. Now, if you guys don't recall, I received this tonneau cover. It was supposed to come with the car, but it didn't come from the factory with it, so they gave me kind of a credit to get this tonneau cover installed once it was available. It was supposed to get installed by December. I didn't get it until February, so I had to also pester them quite a few times to get this tonneau cover installed. But this thing is worth its weight in gold. One of my most favorite features of this vehicle is the fact that it's retractable. I've used it open, closed, etc. It just adds so much utility to the vehicle. And I use this truck bed, as you can see, pretty much every day. Now, I don't necessarily use it for all the things that truck people would use it for. I have a stroller back here, a high chair, but I've also used this for a ton of different things. Like we did transportation of a bunch of different props and stuff for a wedding. We also used this for a bunch of mulch. I had a Home Depot kind of roll in a pallet and drop it into the truck bed. So I've used this for a variety of different things, and at the same time I can always close it up and use it as a large trunk. Now, I've also used the underfloor storage. It's going to be kind of hard for me to show you because of the stroller in here, but I've used this area quite a bit, especially before I got my tonneau cover. I would fit this large stroller in that section. Now, I had to remove a little storage compartment in there, or a divider, but I was able to fit that entire stroller in there and close this. So in the wintertime, when I didn't have a tonneau cover, I was still able to carry around a stroller and not have it kind of inside of the cabin or anything like that. And it also doesn't fit in the frunk. So for what it's worth, that storage area underneath is larger than the frunk area, at least in terms of kind of the shape. You know, in terms of cubic feet, I'm not exactly sure. But that probably finishes off all the practicality portions. Let's talk about the next thing I love about this vehicle. For the next thing I've really loved about this vehicle is the fact that it is an electric vehicle. You know, this is my first EV ever, and I was a little bit kind of scared or uncertain whether I would like it or not. And for the most part, I've had no issues with it and have preferred it over my previous internal combustion engine vehicles. There's definitely some big disadvantages, but in terms of advantages, I like the fact that, you know, the app and the car are so seamless. A lot of times when I had ICE cars, the app was, you know, it couldn't regulate everything. I could turn on the remote start, which was awesome, but I couldn't regulate the temperature. I couldn't turn on the ventilated seats or heated seats or whatever. I can do that with this thing. I do it all the time, especially, you know, if I park this vehicle outside, it gets really hot or cold. I want to make sure my little one is comfortable when we put her back in the car, and so I end up using that remote feature a lot. I'm also not running it just outside, you know, with the, like tailpipe emissions or anything like that, even though this is at the end of the day getting power from the grid, which uses a mixture of, you know, renewables and non-renewables, so you're kind of doing the same thing. It makes me feel better that I'm not running kind of any type of tailpipe emissions when I'm pre-cooling or preheating the vehicle. And also just in terms of getting it home at the end of the day, plugging it in, the next day I'm fully charged. I don't have to ever stop at a gas station. And it's funny because even though stopping at a gas station is 5-10 minutes most, it's nice to not have to even plan that into my morning routine or evening routine, leaving work or going to work. I can just know that when I get home it's going to be plugged in or it's going to be charging while I'm not attending to it, versus me having to stand there and wait for it to charge. A very minor first world problem, if you could even call it that, but I do like the electric powertrain. And then on top of that is just the benefits of that instant torque, very smooth acceleration, very, very quick, more quick than I ever need. It makes it also very nimble to drive because it's so quick. It feels smaller than it actually is and feels lighter than it is. I mean, whenever I tell people this thing weighs like 7,000 pounds, nobody believes me because it's kind of a smaller vehicle and it doesn't feel that way when you're driving it. You know, when you drive a 7,000 pound ICE vehicle, you know, it kind of has that lumbering feeling. It kind of bounces around. You can tell its weight. You cannot tell that with this truck. The other thing I forgot to say about the practicality portion is the fact that this vehicle's footprint is that of a much smaller vehicle than what you would think in terms of its storage capability. I mean, when you think of all the things I can fit in this truck, I would think of, you know, a larger vehicle, like maybe either a big full-size F-150 or even like a Chevy Tahoe or a Cadillac Escalade, something of that size, but its footprint, even though this does have a truck bed, which definitely adds to the length, overall, its footprint is much smaller. I mean, this thing fits in my garage, a little bit tight, but there's still space around it. I can park it in tight spots without any concern about, you know, oh, am I gonna fit in this space or anything like that? Like, that's one of the huge benefits with this vehicle, is its footprint is that of a much smaller vehicle than what its interior storage kind of leads you to believe. The next thing I love about it is the design. Now, design is definitely subjective. I could see why people don't like the exterior. Personally, I really like it. It's got kind of this rugged lines to it, but it's also smooth, it's friendly. You know, you guys have seen a million of these on the road. They all look the same, even the second generation, aside from some minor differences, but I think it's a good looking truck. But for me, what I like even more than the exterior with the cool light bar and the light features, you walk up to the vehicle, kind of does this cool light feature where it goes from the center out. It's not doing it right now for some reason, but what I like even more than that is the interior. So I love the fact that I got the Ocean Coast interior, which it was a little bit touch and go there because I was concerned about the durability and the staining and all of that, but man, I love it. Not only is it cool to look at through the windshield when I'm walking up to it, kind of seeing that white interior, but just sitting in it, it's really nice. Now, technically, I should correct myself. It's not pure white. It's not like the Tesla white. It's more of a gray color, but to me, honestly, this is, you know, this is white. It's kind of hard to describe it otherwise. It's a light gray, if I'm being completely honest. But I love all the material choices here. You've got the wood, and this is real wood as well. You kind of have this faux speaker looking grille over there on the passenger side as well. You've got Rivian embossed into the wood. It's just got some really, really nice materials. All of this is soft touch. I love the fact that even down here on the door panel, this is all soft touch material. I love the white with the dark wood color. I would have liked to have a light wood color. That would look pretty nice. I know that you can get that in the second gen. They didn't offer that in the first gen, or at least I think they did initially, but then there was problems with it, so they stopped doing it. But everything is just really premium feeling. Now, it's obviously not full leather. This is all vegan leather or faux leather, whatever you want to call it, but it's very comfortable. I find it's extremely durable, which brings me to something I want to talk about later in the video, but since we're here, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the durability of this material. Now, driven 12,000 miles, I've had blue jeans on the entire winter, and as you can see, there's really no wear and tear on these seats. They've done a really, really good job with the durability. There has been some blue staining. I've had to use a little bit of a cleaner on it to remove it, but it's super easy to remove. There's also been some staining here. As you can see, it's a little bit maybe darker on these corners. In fact, every time I take it to the service center, they make it dirty again, but it's super easy to clean. I mean, it takes a couple sprays on a towel, microfiber towel, and then you just rub it off, and honestly, 5 minutes of work and you get it out of the seats or any of the white materials. Now, definitely easier to clean than any leather material I've had to clean before. The suede is a little bit tougher. It's, again, not actual suede. I think this is a recycled material, but it is a little bit more difficult to get out of this material, and I find this stains a little bit more than the seats do, but also not terrible either. I got a recommendation from the Rivian service center to use Dr. Beasley's on it, and they have a vegan leather and a suede microfiber material cleaner. They're two separate cleaners. I've used that and I find it generally works pretty well. Also, the wear and tear on the steering wheel, let's show you what that looks like. As you can see, there's a little bit of black markings here from when I took it to the service center recently, but the steering wheel has held up pretty well. There's no big oil stains. You know, you kind of get that shiny leather material on a lot of cars. None of that here, but I will be honest, I rarely have that on most of my vehicles. I keep my hands pretty clean, and I try to be careful about getting lots of, you know, finger oil and stains on it. Of course, over time, it'll still add up, but for now, it does not look like you know, it's been a 12,000 mile steering wheel. It looks pretty good condition. Also, while we're here, the next thing I want to mention I really like about this vehicle is, of course, the software improvements. Now, for those of you that know Rivian, this is kind of standard, but the software has dramatically improved over the 1 year of ownership that I've had it. Now, in some ways, it's actually gotten worse, so we'll touch on that in a bit. But for the most part, there's so many more features. Now you have Google Maps connectivity here. This was the most recent update where now you have, essentially, it even says Google Maps over here. I do like the little graphics that they add around, especially around Christmas time, and Halloween was even crazier, where depending on what drive mode you put it in, they had different graphics in the background. It's just really cool. There we go, that's how you move the car. It's just really cool, the stuff that they've added, the little attention to detail. I do wish this was a little bit quicker to respond. Sometimes, and that kind of leads into one of the things I dislike about this vehicle, is the glitchiness of the software. Sometimes it takes, I don't know, upwards of 10 seconds to load one of these apps. Other times it's pretty quick like it was right now. It kind of just hit or miss on how quickly it will react to your inputs. But they've updated a lot of things with the climate controls. And just overall, it's been so many new features. You kind of forget about it because it happens about once a month. I mean, they added ambient lighting around the door panels. There was always ambient lighting, but it was always a white color. Now you can adjust it to a variety of different colors by going into your settings. And there you go. You can go through a bunch of different colors in here. I wish it was a kind of a flywheel or spin wheel that you can choose whatever color you want, but at least it has like half a dozen or so colors. They've also added YouTube connectivity, so if you're parked and you have access to the premium subscription, which is kind of a little ridiculous, they have to pay for it, but in any case, you can hook up your phone over here and you know, you can watch YouTube videos while you're charging. So that is kind of overall some of the best things I've loved about this vehicle. The performance, of course, is just amazing. The fact that the air suspension will rise up really tall if you go on rougher terrain, and then you can slam it down when you're parked. I love that feature. We'll touch more on something I hate about it just that happened to me just recently later on in this video. But if I think of anything else I love about it, I'll mention in the video, but let's talk about the things I dislike. All right, for the next part of this video, let's talk about the things I've hated, disliked, or heartburn I've had with my Rivian. First off, let's talk about my overall experience with the company. This is something I've mentioned time and time again in most of my Rivian videos, and that is that I think the customer service the Rivian provides is a little subpar, especially considering the fact that they are a startup and they really need to make their customers happy, have that brand loyalty so that people continue buying their cars because their cars are not flawless. Just to kind of quickly summarize some of the experiences I had. First off, when I brought this car home from Denver, which is where I picked it up, I had temp tags, of course, and those temp tags initially expired. They sent me another set of temp tags. Those tags were nearing expiration, and they refused to send me a third set of temp tags so that I could still drive this vehicle without getting a ticket while they were figuring out the permanent registration. They pushed back on it. They didn't let me do it, or they didn't send it to me. I had to constantly keep calling them to figure out the status of my permanent plates. Long story short, they finally got it to me a day after my temp tags expired, but it was only after me calling probably half a dozen times, having to get on the phone with the supervisor, waste my time for something that most car companies figure out in the course of a couple weeks after buying the vehicle. Then I also had quite a bit of trouble getting this tonneau cover, which I'm glad I fought them so much on it because it's such an awesome feature. They promised it to me in December. I called them. They said, okay, I'm ready to get it installed the next visit. Next visit comes, they say, oh, it's not ready yet. So I had to then come back again. I don't even remember the full specifics of it, but they kind of led me the wrong direction, or they lied to me when they said that my car was ready to get this tonneau cover installed, only for it to not be ready and the parts weren't available, and then all of a sudden it showed up. So kind of a hassle there. Next is just in regards to my service experience. Most of the time when I've left the service center, my car is pretty dirty on the inside. They've left tools in there. I've had flashlights, headlamps. They've put the seats in weird positions, like they didn't even bother to reposition it to like a normal positioning. It's just not been a great experience. Most recently they did better, but prior times before that, I've had to actively reach out to them to get updates on my car. Again, like I said, the last time I went in, which was just a couple weeks ago, they did a good job. They kept me updated pretty much every single day. I feel like it got better than the prior experiences, but it's still just okay. I will say I do like the fact that I can communicate with them with the app, and I can schedule the appointment with the app rather than having to call some dealership and then get transferred to multiple different centers to get to the service center and then schedule an appointment. It was a much quicker process through the app. So that part of it is good, but then just the human interaction of it is a little bit subpar. The last comment I'll make on the service experience is I was supposed to get the NACS adapter, the NACS adapter for my charge port. When I purchased the vehicle, they said it's included. It would come by the fall, early fall, maybe October. And I didn't end up getting it until February. Now, I didn't have to call them or anything. honestly because I didn't need to. I wasn't road tripping this vehicle. I was fine plugging it in at home or using Electrify America. But it took them pretty much an additional 4 or 5 months to get me the NACS adapter, and it just showed up in the mail. But that was a little bit of a delay. Again, not something I had to waste my time on, but something to consider. When they tell you they're going to get something by a certain date, it's more than likely not going to happen. Next up, let's talk about some of the gripes I have with the actual car, which kind of make me consider, would I buy it again or not, which I'll address at the end of the video. One of the things, since I'm back here, just something I noticed as I was pulling mulch in and out of the truck bed, is these sections over here on the side of the truck bed. So this one's actually pretty tight, as you can see. It's not moving around. But the side rail over here on the passenger side, look how loose that is. And that happened because I was reaching over, pulling a bag of mulch out, and it happened to clip this section, and it's just wobbly. Look at that. It's just kind of silly considering the fact this is a truck and I was using it for very light truck purposes. I wasn't putting, you know, tons of rocks in here. It was a bag of mulch, wood mulch, that happened to catch the edge, and now it's rattling up here. So that's pretty dumb. The next thing is the interior rattling. So as you'll notice, there's a theme here. It's rattles, and it really comes down to build quality or lack thereof. Talking about the rattle, I have noticed, let me get my mic flipped around over here. There is a rattle located on this dashboard. And as you can see, this is kind of a speaker grill material. I believe there is a speaker located underneath here, but this little section over here is constantly rattling. So I began to notice this rattle probably about, I don't know, 2 months into ownership. When I went in for my first service visit in January, get out of here, bud. I took it into the service center the first time in January, and they said they fixed it. Give or take a week, and I started noticing it again. So I went in for my service visit for the tonneau cover. I brought it up again. That was in February, and again, they said they adjusted it, made some changes. I want to say maybe a day went by, and I started hearing the rattle again. So I decided, you know what, it's not a big deal, whatever. It's annoying because this is a, on paper, $85,000 vehicle, and I've never sat into really even a $25,000 vehicle that had a rattle like this. But I was like, that's fine. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to waste my time to go to the service center again. But I figured when I went in my last time, which I'll talk about what happened there if you didn't see my last video, I brought it up again saying, hey, can you guys just address that rattle? Well, they ended up not only trying to address the rattle, they replaced my entire steering column, because they attributed the noise to the steering column. And then in their notes and in person when I was picking up the vehicle, they said, we test drove it, the rattle is gone. Well, not even 5 minutes after leaving the service center, I hear this terrible rattle, worse than it's ever been before, and I can visibly see this little speaker area vibrating. In fact, you can see me push it down. There's like a clicking sound, and this just vibrates as I'm driving over small, uneven pavement or whatever. And it's a very loud interior noise. It sounds like I'm driving a rattle can. In fact, we have a Fiat 500 Abarth, and that thing is like 12, 13 years old, and it has less rattles than my Rivian. And that's Fiat. I mean, everybody knows about the quality of Fiat. So it's just frustrating, and it makes for the interior to feel kind of cheap and not as refined as the design leads you to believe. It kind of makes you frustrated. Now, I also had some rattles coming from underneath the vehicle, which were mostly addressed in the very first visit when I went in January. They replaced something called the jounce lines or tightened the hub to knuckle fasteners. I don't know exactly what they did. That, you know, I'm not a mechanic, so I don't know all the details on that. But they did do some tightening, replacing of some parts, and I noticed that the interior doesn't sound as rattly as it used to. That's not to say that all the rattles, aside from the dashboard, are gone. There's still a little bit of what people in the industry call NVH, noise, vibration, and harshness. There's still a little bit of that on the inside, and in fact, on the freeway, this thing isn't as quiet and refined as you would think it to be. It's actually a little bit louder. Something I noticed because when they gave me my last service visit, they gave me a rental car. It was an Audi Q3, and it was okay. It was a fine car, but I noticed going from that car to this car, this thing is considerably louder than the Audi Q3, which is like the entry-level Audi. It just goes to show that the Germans, you know, or legacy manufacturers, they know what they're doing in terms of ride quality and kind of fit and finish on the interior, sound quality. I also don't think that my all-terrain tires helped the situation. When I went in the second time for my service center visit, they gave me an R1T with the regular tires, the efficient tires, and it was noticeably quieter on the inside. So these Scorpion all-terrain Pirellis, they are a bit loud, which kind of comes with the territory considering these are more off-road ready tires. A couple other things I hate that I already briefly mentioned on the inside is the software glitchiness. Sometimes it's slow to respond. Sometimes I have to do a hard reset, which is where you hit the left and the right button on the steering wheel, hold it down, wait a couple seconds, and it will reboot. I've had to do that probably 5 or 6 times throughout my entire year of owning this vehicle just to get things to start working again, whether that's gear guard not loading or the front instrument panel display glitching and not showing me my speed, or usually it shows you my speed, but it doesn't really show you like navigation or something like, there's some feature missing. Usually a hard reset is what it takes, which, that kind of comes with the territory, but it's a little bit frustrating, especially when you don't really have a good place to pull over and reset the system, and it doesn't let you do that while driving for obvious reasons. Other thing that I found most frustrating with the software is the phone as a key feature, and this is something that was actually really seamless when I purchased the vehicle. I'd walk up to the car, it would unlock, I'd leave, it would lock. More recently, with the last couple updates, I've noticed things got worse, and now in the mornings when I get into the vehicle, it will sometimes not recognize my phone, and it will make me use either a physical key or a key card to get the vehicle to start working. And I'll get a message over here on the gauge cluster saying phone or key is not detected. It shows me the image of where I can put my key card, which is located over here. And the moral of the story is to always carry the key card with you, which I do anyways, but even more so with the glitchiness I've had. And the problem with that is sometimes it'll start working. Like this morning it did that. It all of a sudden, after me pushing the brake pedal a couple times, it recognized my phone and started working. But then as I was driving, it gave me the alert on the screen saying, oh, it does not recognize or can't find a key, which means for some reason it disconnected. And so when I got to my destination, I couldn't just walk away and expect the car to lock. I had to either use my key card or the phone app itself to lock the vehicle. So you almost have to just be more mindful of it, especially when you're so used to walking up to the car, it unlocks, leaving, it locks. Sometimes when it doesn't do that, you may mistakenly leave the car unlocked, which is not a good thing. So I don't know why it's all of a sudden stopped working as well as it used to, but pretty much every morning I have a hard time with it connecting. Whether that's because the vehicle is sleeping, maybe it's an issue with my phone, I honestly don't know, but it's been subpar in terms of performance. The other feature that started working worse with the latest update where they added Google Maps connectivity is my air conditioning system. So it's pretty hot here. It's the beginning of August and it gets to easily 100 degrees. And I noticed the other day that it was all of a sudden starting to, like, as I'm driving, reduce the fan speed, even though I didn't touch any of the fan speed buttons over here. It just, all of a sudden, the airflow was weaker. And then after a few minutes, it would all of a sudden increase. And again, I haven't touched the airflow button. And so I've noticed that it sometimes just has a mind of its own. And it also felt like the temperature wasn't as cold as it used to be. But then all of a sudden, it reverts back to working great. So it's not to say that, oh, maybe the air compressor's going out or there's some issue there. No, it's just random. When it decides to work, it does great air conditioning, and the AC here is really good. But then other times, it'll just not work as well as it should. And again, that's something I noticed only with the latest software update. And I've actually noticed that in the forums, some people have been talking about that. And so that's kind of a pro and a con of software updates. Sometimes they make amazing new features. Other times they somehow break a feature that's been working fine for the last 5 years. Now, there is a feature that I absolutely hate on this vehicle, which is probably one of my most hated features. And the reason I say it's most hated is because I think it's the dumbest feature that any automaker could include on a car, and Rivian happened to do it. And that is when I pull this vehicle into reverse. So let me actually demonstrate. So I put it into reverse. Most people who aren't used to backup cameras or maybe don't want to rely solely on a backup camera generally turn their heads, right? Look out the rear window. And because you do so, your butt kind of lifts off the seat, right? Because our bodies are made in such a way, human anatomy is in such a way that you cannot like turn your back while keeping your butt planted on the seat. this is important because when you lift up your butt cheeks off the back as you're looking out the rear and you start moving, this vehicle will occasionally determine that there's no driver sitting in the driver's seat. This vehicle is somehow moving on its own. Somebody from outside is pushing on the accelerator, and it will stop the vehicle dead in its tracks and turn on the park feature. So it essentially makes you rely solely on the camera system versus using your own eyes and twisting your head to look out the rear view window. Now, I'm not quite sure why I didn't do it right now. Let me try it one more time. Let me put it in reverse, and let me demonstrate what I'm talking about. So I put it in reverse here. It is in reverse. I'm lifting up my butt, moving back. Wow, and it's working. It is working. Maybe they finally fixed it in the latest update. I'm sure it's just working because I'm filming the video, because every other time I've done that, this vehicle stops and does not let me pull out of a parking spot. In fact, I remember the first time it did this to me, I was at the DMV getting this vehicle registered, and there's a car waiting to pull into my parking spot, and I just can't seem to get out of this parking spot. I put in reverse, I start reversing, stops. Again, I put in reverse, start reversing, stop. It took me like 10 times to get out of a parking spot. The guy probably thought I was a moron, which I am, but I didn't want them to know that. And that is something that Rivian put as a feature. But perhaps now, finally, they've updated it that that's not an issue. But, well, I'll report, I guess, next year if that's something I've noticed. Now, another thing I dislike about this software is the fact that Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are missing. Now, this is something I have to caveat, because you're either the type of person that's full Apple CarPlay and Android Auto and nothing could be better, or you're in the other camp where Apple CarPlay and Android Auto sucks, there's no need for it. I'm kind of in that middle area, and let me explain. So I am not the biggest proponent of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Every time I've experienced it in any of the press cars I've reviewed, generally it crashes. It's not super reliable. It drains your battery pretty badly, at least on my phone. And I think there's only been a handful of cars that have done it really well, where you can easily switch from the car's UI to the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto UI. Mercedes is the one that comes to mind. So for the most part, I could take it or leave it. The reason I say it's important to have here is because, unlike Tesla, they don't have a lot of native apps to do the same things that Apple CarPlay or Android Auto provides. So I'm not quite sure on Tesla, but there is definitely no Waze functionality built into Rivian software. And I use Waze a lot. It helps me figure out where some speed traps happen to be. Not that I ever exceed the speed limit. It also helps navigate what the fastest route is. And it's a little bit better than Google. The fact that they have Google on here is great, and I'm probably going to lean more on that because it's generally reliable, but it would have been nice to have Waze. Also, I have YouTube Music. I'm one of the few that use it, apparently, because most people use Spotify. There is no YouTube Music functionality here. So it pretty much just makes me use the native Bluetooth app, and it's kind of a boring app. I mean, there's nothing here. I can't really, do much with like my playlist or anything like that. Like it just shows me what I'm playing, and then on the passenger side I can adjust, to seek track buttons and whatever, or I could use the steering wheel. But for the most part, it doesn't give me much functionality when I'm using my native Bluetooth music. So there's just not enough applications built into the software to avoid having Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. If you can do it well while having those native apps, great. Who needs Apple CarPlay and Android Auto? But if you're missing a lot of those features, just throw it in. I don't get why they just are vehemently opposed to including it. Probably because of cost. They probably have to pay Apple or Google some sort of royalty fees or whatever to use the software, but it's worth it. I mean, there's, I don't know, some stat out there that 85% of new car buyers want that feature. And if you don't have majority of the apps that are included on those, then you're missing out. I think Rivian is missing out by not including that feature. They've been slowly integrating more YouTube stuff or Google stuff into their software, but it's slow, and it's still not their full suite of products. All right, as we come close to wrapping up this video, I want to talk about some of the features in this vehicle that I use more than I thought and some that I use less than I thought, because this thing comes with a lot of accessories and different kind of cool features or unique features that, some people may be wondering, are you actually going to use that? And I'm here to answer that. So, like I mentioned, the front, I definitely use a lot. The next kind of quirky feature with this vehicle is the flashlight located inside of the door panel. So there is a little flashlight over here. You pull it out and it's always fully charged. It's pretty bright. It's 1,000 lumens. And I don't really use this feature very often at all. I think I've used it maybe 2 times And it was more so to be like, oh yeah, I have a flashlight, let me use it. Usually I'm at my house and I have a flashlight elsewhere, or I have my phone, which I typically use that as a flashlight. Also, sometimes it gets caught in here and it won't pop out. So as you can see, like supposed to pop out like that. Sometimes it doesn't do that for some reason. So honestly, if it's paid accessory, I wouldn't pay for it. I can't remember if it's paid now. It was free when my car was new. Also, I want to talk about the camp speaker. This thing's kind of a piece of crap, and I'm being a little bit harsh with it because I kind of had a bad experience with it recently, but I've used this thing probably about 5 or 6 times, and it's worked pretty good, I would say 4 times. The other 2 times, not so great. Couple issues I have with it. One, I think this thing is pretty massive, and for something that's this big and this kind of heavy, I would expect it to have extremely loud capabilities. Like, you know, you put in a big venue or hall, you could, you know, entertain, or at least a lot of people could hear the music coming out of this thing. That's false. I have a little Motorola deck speaker that's probably like 1/8 of this size, and it shoots out louder volumes and just as crisp and just as good as this speaker. This thing actually doesn't get very loud. You can't really put this in like a, you know, 400 square foot room and really, you know, light it up. It's not one of those types of speakers. Secondly, it's not very user friendly. So last time I tried using it, or 2 times ago, I tried hooking up my phone via Bluetooth and it would refuse to hook up to this speaker. No idea why. I tried looking up in the forums how to use this and resetting it. Mind you, I had already used it a couple times via Bluetooth before, so this was not my first time using it, but it was refusing to hook up. For a moment there, I thought maybe the battery was dead, which is really weird because it should constantly be charging inside of the center arm console. So there's no way the battery could be dead. And I think maybe that was the issue. After finally like playing around with it, hooking it up, we even had somebody at the restaurant we were trying to use this thing for hook up their phone. Theirs wasn't really working. My wife's phone, which is an iPhone, mine's an Android, haha, yeah, you can make the comments. Her phone finally hooked up to it, but it wasn't instant. It took a couple times of trying and turning it off, Bluetooth, restarting it. Finally, it hooked up to it. My phone still refused to do it. It just didn't work. So those are my gripes with the speaker. I thought it would be a good idea. It'd be awesome to have while you're camping and stuff, but I just can't trust this is going to be reliable. And I don't really know what half these buttons are. Like, tell me something. Maybe you guys can answer this. What in the world is this button supposed to do? What is a circle? What am I supposed to make of that? I get mute, volume up, volume down. I get the play button. What the hell is that button supposed to do? No clue. Maybe it's the light? I don't know. It's frustrating. I don't really like it. It looks cool, but I would skip on it if you have to pay for it. As we make our way back, I've already talked about the gear tunnel and then the tonneau cover. Next thing I want to talk about, probably the last kind of cool, funky feature is, well, first let's talk about the power outlets. This is nothing new. This isn't unique to Rivian, but I have used those a handful of times. I'm glad they have it. It works pretty well. You can regulate it on and off inside of the software. The feature I do want to talk about is the air compressor system. Now, this is a feature that I would say take it or leave it. It is nice to have, and it really depends on your use case. For me, I think I've only used it maybe once or maybe 2 times, and it works good. I mean, it goes up to, I think, 100 PSI. I have been told that the indicator that this, where it says 0 PSI, it's not accurate. Like if you set it to, 10 PSI, it's not actually going to pump up to 10 PSI. So it's best to have your own reader, but it is cool that it has that included in the vehicle. Like I think I used it on, I can't remember if it was a bike tire or something like that, or maybe an airsoft gun or something. And it's cool that you have this little accessory unit over here where this is what houses your cables that you can use for your air compressor. So I think it's a nice feature. I just haven't used it as often as I probably would like or should. So if you end up going on the trails a lot, if you end up inflating or deflating stuff, it's very helpful. In fact, I'm probably going to do a beach day here at some time later in August, and we might have some pool inflatables and stuff like that. I do want to test it out and see how easy it is to use. So again, if you don't have it, not a big deal. Oh, one other thing that I haven't yet used is the gear guard where it comes to the locking feature. So there is a cable on the front that you can use to tie around different things. Like I could tie it around a bike or a stroller or whatever, and I plug it in to these two holes over here underneath the air compressor. And if somebody comes and starts tugging on that cable, which is supposed to be tear resistant, whatever, then it will start recording, and it might even trigger the alarm, and it's probably going to give me a notification in the app that somebody's trying to steal my stuff. I haven't used that, haven't needed to, especially now with the tonneau cover, but that's a feature that I think is nice to have. It's just, again, for my use case, not really helpful, or not really needed, I should say. Last feature I haven't really used much is honestly the off-road capabilities, and that's just because I haven't really had an opportunity to do so. So mine does come with a skid plate, or it's supposed to, all the way underneath the vehicle, protecting the battery pack, and I just haven't had the chance to take this vehicle off-roading. I do still want to, and I will probably try to do it at some point in the next year, so hopefully at the year 2 video, I can give you an update on that. Now, we've talked about build quality and kind of the lack thereof. Let's talk about reliability, which is one of the reasons why I'm a little hesitant to take this vehicle off-roading. Most recently, you may have seen my video, I had an air suspension failure, and pretty much no idea how it happened. And talking with the Rivian Service Center, there was really no explanation as to why this happened. It's just, oh yeah, this part tends to fail. So if you have a Rivian with air suspension, which they all do, you're just gonna have to have some failure at one point or another. Now, I am very well aware that air suspension does not last forever. Every single air suspension system out there will fail at some point. It's not a question of if, but when. However, usually, even with some of the most unreliable manufacturers, that is somewhere around the 80, 90, 100,000 mile mark, right? It's an older vehicle, it's been driven a lot. Mine went out at 12,000 miles, which I've never heard of before from an air suspension failure. If you guys are interested in more of the details, watch that last video, but it was leaking. And in fact, in the service write-up, it was not only leaking, but they also had to change the air compressor because there was an air blockage inside of the air compressor, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. They also replaced the old parts with new updated parts that are supposed to be more reliable. They actually changed out the driver and the passenger side. Even though my driver's side seemed fine, they decided to update it with the latest parts so that it's more reliable. All in all, that is to say, this vehicle makes me definitely question the long-term reliability of owning one of these vehicles. After my 1 year of experiences, personally, I would never buy one out of warranty. I'd either buy new, gently used, or lease it, because out of warranty, I can't imagine what the expense of changing out that air suspension would be. I've heard somewhere north of $3,000, and I think that's per hub. So you're looking at possibly $12,000 for a full 4-wheel air suspension change. And that's just one of the issues I've had. I've had a lot of creaks. I've had parts that didn't fit together right, like the passenger door would creak a lot. My gear tunnel doors would creak a lot. That's not even stuff I've discussed in this video, but I've discussed in other videos. I just don't trust the reliability. Now, thankfully, Rivian has a pretty good warranty. It's a 5-year, 60,000 mile bumper to bumper, so that covers everything that a typical 3-year, 36,000 mile warranty does on all other cars. But at the end of the day, you still have to, you know, scramble to figure out where to go. Like if your car just dies in the middle of the road, you gotta call a tow truck company, you gotta have them tow it to the Rivian Service Center. If you live nearby one, hopefully you do, you gotta get a rental car, you have to, I mean, it's a process that is unnecessary if you have a reliable vehicle. The nice thing is it hasn't cost me out of pocket at all to get all these repairs done. They've kind of deducted a lot of the charges and stuff that they were going to charge, so I don't know if it's just a courtesy or if that's just the fact that it's under warranty, but I haven't paid anything out of pocket. But I have spent quite a bit of time at the Enterprise rental car agency waiting for my car to be ready to take a rental, and I've driven in some not so great rental cars. I mean, it's just that experience that kind of, you know, puts a bad taste in your mouth for the brand and the reliability and the long-term ownership of this vehicle. The only other car that I can recall that had this bad reliability was my mom's Mercedes ML 300, I think, or 320 from back in like 2001. She was one of the very early kind of model year MLs, and they were known to be tremendously unreliable. I mean, that thing was in the shop pretty much as often as this thing was. And it was a very frustrating experience. The steering column went out, power steering went out, like there were so many things that would go wrong. And I'm honestly getting that same impression from this car. And even though it's awesome, it's got some great things to it, reliability is one of the biggest important factors when it comes to owning a vehicle. And after 3 service visits, in 1 year and a fourth one coming up to address that rattle in the dashboard, this thing makes me question if it's ever going to be reliable after they kind of work out the first few things. I mean, it just seems like there's new problems that start showing up, and it's not problems that were originally on the vehicle when it was first manufactured. The last thing I'll address before I jump into my overall thoughts and recommendations is the cost of electricity. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, you know, did I save any money on electricity? You know, there's rates that are really sky high in some areas, and how does this compare? So coming from a 2021 Ford Bronco with the 2.3 liter EcoBoost, I was getting somewhere around 18, 19 miles per gallon. I drive this vehicle, the same use cases that I did my Bronco. It comes out to about 12,000 or so miles a year. Various little road trips here and there, up north, down south. What I will say is my electricity bill over the entire course of 1 year has gone up on average around $91.50. That's the math that I looked up directly from my electricity bill. It's $91.50. So you can round it up to about $100 a month. That's how much more this vehicle costs for my electricity using it day to day like I did my Bronco. Now, I will also note that in the summer months, it's a little bit more than $100. In the winter months, it's a little bit less. Now, in comparison to my Ford, I spent about $180 or so a month on gas costs. So, taking the difference between the two, you're looking at somewhere between $80 to $90 a month in savings driving this electric vehicle versus driving my Ford Bronco. Now, if you had a much more efficient vehicle, unlike my Bronco, something like a Prius getting 50 miles per gallon, probably a little bit of a different story. It might be a wash at that point. But at the same time, you're not comparing a Prius to a Rivian R1T because you're not going to take a Prius off-roading, or at least you shouldn't. You don't have as much storage capability. You can't use it as a truck. So I don't think the Prius is the direct competitor to this. You kind of have to look at something like an F-150 or maybe a Ford Ranger or something like that and then do the comparison there. But for me, I would say 80 to 90 bucks savings a month is actually pretty good and kind of helps justify a little bit of a higher payment. Now, in terms of electricity here in Utah, on average, it's about 16 cents per kilowatt hour. So if you want to do the math yourself, you can use that as kind of the average because that's kind of where it is across the US, but I would check your local rates to know for sure. Also, one comment to make about the electricity costs that I failed to mention, that's me charging at home. If I take it on a road trip where I stop at a supercharger or an Electrify America, the cost of filling up is at or above what it would be for gas. I mean, when I went down recently to southern Utah, I spent about $45 to get about 240 miles of range or so each time. So I think it's a little bit more expensive than gas. So if you're constantly doing supercharging, electric's not going to be cheaper. If you plug and charge at home, it's going to be cheaper than gas. I do want to mention briefly insurance. I don't want to go into the specifics because insurance is such a variable number depending on your age, driving history, where you're located, how you use it, where you park. I mean, the list goes on. They have experts that get paid a lot of money to set insurance rates, but I will just give you a comparison. This thing costs double the insurance cost monthly than my Ford Bronco. That sounds like an astronomical number, but my Bronco was incredibly low for its insurance. Not quite sure why. My Bronco was almost the same monthly payment as my Fiat 500C, which is a 2012 or 2013 vehicle, and it's a much smaller, much cheaper car. So I'm not quite sure why the Bronco was so cheap, but this thing is double the price. That said, this thing is about 30% less than my Hellcat, maybe 20% less. So it's cheaper than a Hellcat, but it's more expensive than a Bronco. I gotta say, I was worried about insurance being a huge cost. It's really not that bad on this thing. Now, if God forbid it gets in an accident or whatever, obviously the rates could go crazy. But in my experience, insurance is not something that hold me back from getting this vehicle. That's, again, anecdotal based on my experience, my age here in Utah. You might have a totally different story, so I'd get a quote before you commit to purchasing one. All right, to finish off this already very long video, what are my overall thoughts on the Rivian and would I buy it again? Well, as you may have gathered in all my videos, I love this vehicle. It's the best car I've ever owned. I also hate it, and it's the worst car I've ever owned. From a reliability standpoint, it is the least reliable car I've ever owned. That said, it's never really left me stranded. It's just been little problems here and there, the biggest one being the air suspension, which almost did leave me stranded, but I still kept driving it, and it didn't stop me from driving. But it was getting close to being like, I can't drive this vehicle. I also love it because it's quick, it looks good, it rides well. Not the softest vehicle I've driven, but for a truck, it rides really well. Great comfort on the inside. Tons of practical. I mean, the list goes on with the things that I love about it. I'm emotionally attached to it. It's like an abusive relationship. It beats me up, but I still want to be inside of the vehicle and driving it. And I think a lot of Rivian owners fall into the same camp. They can't say they love it, but they also can't find another vehicle that accomplishes all of the things that this vehicle accomplishes for the same price, or even just on the market in general. This thing just does so many things. They just have to get better. I think Rivian in 5 to 10 years will be good. I think they'll be able to work out some of these kinks, but if you're like me and still considered an early adopter, you're gonna have some frustrations. Would I buy this vehicle again? As of today, no, I would not. If it continues going down the path it's at right now, likely at the end of the lease term, I'm just gonna hand the keys back to Rivian and go get something else. But it also depends on the day that you ask me. Before I had the air suspension issues, I would have said yes. In fact, when I was planning on making this video before that, I was gonna say yes, I definitely would buy this car again. I probably wouldn't get a Gen 2 because they're more expensive and I don't really see any huge major improvements aside from some self-driving. But now, my answer is no. Tomorrow it might be yes again. I'm really on the fence with this car, and I am glad that I have the lease because it gives me that flexibility at the end of the term to say bye-bye, or I'm gonna buy this out, or you know, whatever. So we'll see. I'll keep you guys updated. It's not a hassle-free ownership experience, but it also is an amazing car, and I'm not gonna sell it short on that. This is the best car, the jack of all trades that can do everything all in one. But with that comes some sacrifices. So I hope you guys enjoyed this long video. Hit that like button if you did. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. And if this is your first time stopping by, check out all my social media at Backseat Driver, same as the YouTube channel name. Until next time, everybody, I hope you stay schwazy, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.